MGTOW brothers, lend me your ears, for we have a lot to cover. Today, I want to cover what I want to call our Slattern Corner. I touched upon this. I want this to be a regular series event, if you like. I want to cover someone called Sharon today. What's the best way of describing her? Let's just say she's what you'd call woke. She's a very aggressive social justice warrior. Another way of describing her is a Washington State whale. Not very charitable to our whale friends, but anyway, she's promiscuous. She's actually a promiscuous whore, but that's quite unfair to the world's oldest profession, which I have a lot of respect for. But yeah, I mean, these are things of her choice. On the other hand, she's very smart, introspective, analytical. Intelligence is a funny one, isn't it? How do you define intelligence? Now, in terms of being analytical, being introspective, she was up there. She was cool. She was socially awkward, but she would say things, she'd come to invalid conclusions. Example, she said things like she's really scared that Trump's going to get in because usually when Republicans get in, when the Republicans are the ones that turn to violence and do the killings. It's historically that's what she said, and it's funny because it totally dismisses what BLM, the rioters, and Antifa have been doing. Totally ignores that, and this is basically denial of facts. It indicates cognitive dissonance. So intelligence, she's still intelligent, but she just is away from reality, like a lot of theoretical people. I think what allured me to her was I was going through a rough time. I was going through a divorce at the time, and she offered some comfort. She's nomadic. I love traveling. I've got a nomadic spirit in me. The challenge I find is that a lot of nomadic people are usually left-leaning nihilists, like they're collectivists, and they're usually minimalists too. You know, I want to just yeah. She was like that. So although we connected on that aspect to a bit, it ended as well in that regard. We were never really, well, we were intimate a bit, but I would never have called her my ex, or she was never really a girlfriend. I think she'd call me her ex, but I guess I should be honest, seeing as how many guys she's been with. The thing about her is she could barely be single. She couldn't bear to be single, and it showed. She would mistake sexual intimacy for love. Why am I covering this? I should probably take a step back. I'm covering this. The Slattern Corner is there, not to primarily to air dirty laundry, and I'm sure that's going to happen. I'm human, but it's mainly there so that we can learn and analyze. Because I think people, there's a few types of people in the world, and there's lots of similarities. And if some of the MGTOW community can learn from this, and it helps them tackle certain kinds of people, not necessarily in relationships, just people in everyday life, we're one step ahead. So, okay, so she would mistake sexual intimacy for love, which is very common. She was obviously needing and wanting something. And it outlines that aspect that often us MGTOW fraternity have outlined. Women, even gross land whales. I mean, we're talking. She's 5'11" and she's 370 pounds or something. But even land whales have that option, and why? Because we let them. Because a lot of males basically don't care. They've completely lost their standards, and they'll just go for anything, and they're desperate. And that's on us, not us MGTOW brethren, but on men. So, you know, on the other hand, you have the lower end of the male spectrum, and they're basically insults. So it's you know, and then we have to also have suffer the indignity of hearing about male patriarchy and how we got it so good. So yeah, go and figure that one out. She was always easily offended all the time. She's what I would call the opposite of being resilient, you know, not mentally resilient. She actually started suffering anxiety and regressed. She had to move in back with her parents. She lived with her parents most of the time anyway. She ventured out, you know, and then she had to go back because she suffered from all this anxiety. And she was on some kind of drugs, I think, as well for a while. So she was a real mess. What does being resilient mean? To me, being resilient doesn't necessarily mean you're the strong silent type that suffers in silence. To me, being resilient is, there's an old saying, it's not how much punishment a person can endure, it's whether a person can continue to traverse in the direction they were headed even when they endure the punishment. How they keep going. And to me, that's resilience. Taking a lot of crap that's happened in life and carrying on your goal focused mission. That's resilience. That's true resilience. And she wasn't that. I mean, she was unhappy, angry at the world. She was a mess. So look for these. I'm going to summarize at the end. Always about herself. I mean, she was socially awkward, not very personable. She would open up to me. I mean, everyone seems to. I'm a good listener. But she was always about herself. She'd only contact me when she wanted something, you know. And then the worst thing of all, she'd talk at me and then she'd talk over me and not really let me get a word in edgeways. Again, why did I keep talking to her? The main thing for me was I'm a studier of human nature and it gave me tremendous insight. I don't like to just read something on Breitbart News or on some rag online. I like to experience things for myself. That's where the nomadic thing comes in. And I study I try to put things together and understand. I think it's healthy for people to challenge their perceptions and challenge their models of the world. Everyone has a model of the world. I think it's very healthy to challenge these models of the world that we have constructed. I mean, she was programmed lock stock. She was programmed and had a prescribed view of the world. It was straight out of women's studies and CNN and the Guardian, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. It was pretty amazing. I'm going to give an example. On the New Year's Eve, we went to see a film called Her. Her was a film that starred Joaquin Phoenix, and it was about Joaquin Phoenix's character falling in love with an AI system. It was an interesting concept, especially for us MGTOW people, because I think in the community we've talked about substitutes for the need for feminine company. And she was so programmed to look for certain triggers. She was looking for sexual objectification, and to her, the film Her was sexual objectification. And this is an example of her intelligence coming to the wrong conclusions. She said Her was sexual objectification of a woman. Now, Her is about pure love between a man and the intellect or the AI of a machine. There's no body, there's no objectification of a woman in terms of the body, or parts or whatever. And she'd still say that it's because she's been programmed to look for this prescribed view of the world. That's how I take it. She would continually slag off her dad. That's another example. Even though he was basically supporting her, and everything I saw about him, he wasn't necessarily a bad guy. He just wanted a simple, quiet life, away from the nagging wife, you know. But she was programmed because he's a guy, and basically, you know, it's kind of sad. It just shows the wholesale brainwashing. So, in a more general sense, let's pan out. What you'll find, and I found this a lot. You find these women that no man is good enough, or they've slept around so much, no one's really good enough, and they're looking for the next thing. They're looking for the next thing. No one's good enough because feminism has basically empowered them so much, and men are simultaneously pushed down. that they're continually looking. No one's good enough. They're told that they can do it all. They can have a career. They don't need no man. And what ends up happening, they're not told about the war. You know, that's why you see them after 40 piling on shitloads of makeup. And then they're like, she's actually hit 40 now, and what you're dealing with is she doesn't offer anyone anything, and she's not even aware of this, that she's a huge land well. On top of that, she no longer has any real allure because she's losing it. But wimpy pussy sissy males will still go for her because a woman like her can just spread her, you know, and people are drawn to it. But my point is, in terms of long-term relationships, she doesn't offer anything because she'll continually fight. It's a battle with her. And the interesting story in this case is a guy called Trevor. She ended up settling with him. Trevor, I kind of feel sorry for. It's obvious when you meet him. You start doing digging and you find out that he came from a single parent household, his mother, and he's very doesn't have a job. He can't have a job. He suffers from anxiety. He can't do. He can't plan at all. He's very feminine. He's very nice. Um, he's very agreeable, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Um, he can't hold down a job. He can't do anything. He doesn't have any goals. He doesn't have. He can't achieve. It's who he is. It's how he is. It's how he's been wired. He's. You would think he's the ideal in a female dominated relationship. You think he was the ideal guy, and this illustrates the thing that us MGTOW have been saying. But this is a literal illustration of it. This isn't some fairy tale or some anecdote. This is something firsthand I saw, and it's incredible. He's a guy that would wake up in summer and say, "Oh, what season is it? Summer. Well, what season is it? Summer." And then it's autumn. I mean, that's the level of the mind we're talking about. And he just loved the ground she walked on, you know. He'd cook for her, make coffee, he'd do everything for her, but it wasn't good enough. And I think this is where the intelligence comes. She'd phone me up a lot, and she was aware that it didn't make any sense, because he should, by all accounts, be her dream guy, but he's not, because it was winding her up, and it was getting her furious. And in the end, she'd say, "Stay away from me," and she kicked him out. And he had nowhere to go because he was like a female man. He was like a sissified guy. He can't do anything. He can't look after himself. He's literally useless. You know, he's not able to drive. He's dreadful. So the interesting thing is, and you think, you know, with her social justice warrior mindset, he should be a dream guy, but he's not. And in the end, she started to do a prescribed. Well, he's got microaggressions and passive aggressive tendencies, and believe me, he didn't have any passive aggressive tendencies. You know, he was scared of losing her. He was incredibly clingy and needy. That's not passive aggressive tendencies. It's her prescribing her bullshit worldview and trying to look for problems. Um, so I think it's interesting, that story, because it illustrates literally what we all know to be true, or have known to be true. So what I want to do is I want to use this now to summarize, because as a MGTOW, we aspire to not to being self-sufficient and not necessarily having long-term relationships. But I still think if you want to succeed in life, you're going to have to interact and have some kind of relationship, not necessarily sexual, but some kind of relationship with different people. And I think these observations are very important because you can generalize and you can see these patterns in people, and from that you can take decisive action when you choose to go forward and interact. So number one, in the old days, they said that a partner, if you're into such things, would pull you and push you and drive you to your full potential. There was the old insidious saying, "Behind every great man there is a woman," and which is a load of bullcrap. But what it was really about, I think, was you boost each other up. And with someone like Sharon, it's all about her. It's all about tearing you down. It's this war that I've talked about between men and women that some men are not aware of. Um, it's about some kind of competition and ire directed towards guys. So look out for that on your travels and on your interactions with people and women like this. What you'll find with people like her is they have a much less diverse set of friends. And when I say diverse, I mean diverse in terms of thinking. Their friends are going to be totally like them, and otherwise they won't befriend them. I mean, she didn't know what my mindset was really. She knew I was kind of conservative, but I kept it quiet because right now I want to talk to her because it's too much. I've got enough information. Put the barriers up. Thank you very much, and but it's interesting. So you'll find with her a much less diverse set of friends with these kind of people. Number three, you find woke women like her, social justice warrior, are continuously unhappy. That's why they want to change the world. Sharon was intelligent, and she was introspective enough to isolate her own flaws, and that's unusual, I think. But she was just too far indoctrinated to actually do anything about it. She wanted to change the world, and there's an old saying: a man at sea can change his ship and alter his ship, but he can't change his sea. And I think it's very relevant here. You'll find with amongst leftists, according to a 2009 Gallup poll, mental illness, 58% of Republicans showed that they are actually pretty stable and don't suffer from mental illness, compared to 38% of Democrats. 2013 BuzzFeed and SurveyMonkey surveys concluded Democrats 1.5 to 2 times more likely to have a higher occurrence of depression and anxiety, attention deficit disorder, and PTSD. So that's what we're dealing with here. That's number three. Number four, now I'm over all this, but it must be said, and it's been shown over and over again, conservative women look hotter. You know, they look hotter, and it's because usually woke leftists have emotional problems, which leads to them overeating. In the case of our friend Sharon, for instance, and they view good grooming as trying to please the enemy, i.e., men. Example with her, she had a really odorous snatch. It was pretty gross, and I don't know what's going on down there, but she probably didn't bother washing because it wasn't needed, and it's how a real woman smells and that kind of shit. But that's what we're dealing with, So, food for thought. Sauce for the goose. Actually, no. They take themselves far too seriously. It's a common pattern I found, and hand in hand with this, they have no sense of humor. So it's. I think that's pretty important takeaway. Number six, they're less likely to have a proper job. Conservative women or partners are going to have a proper, decent career and job. Leftists typically don't. And if you want equality, what's the deal? We've been fighting for equality for 50 years. Don't give me this pay gap bullshit. That's already been debunked. What are you waiting for? You want to pay your own way, then do so. The thing is, they don't. That's the problem. So woke women don't have a proper job or career. They see. I mean, the thing is now they're touting capitalism as being oppressive. That's what it's really about. Laziness. And number seven, I generally am recommending walking away and not bothering to have any kind of real romantic relationship. You have to have a relationship in general, people, be it your neighbor or people you're working with, if you want to do well in life. But in terms of romantic relationship, I generally recommend walking away. But what this is here for is to recognize a sign. They might even tell people here who are already in a relationship, and this may allow them to recognize signs and give them insights. A woke woman like Sharon is heavily entrenched in the entitlement culture, the cancel culture, which is again to do with a lack of diversity of thought because they push people out that don't align to their views. And most importantly, they view men as basically replaceable sperm donors. They view men as replaceable sperm donors, all the while using family courts. If you had the misfortune of getting married to one, using family courts to try and screw you over through your wallet. And obviously family courts have been infiltrated by advocates of third-wave feminism, So your chances are basically not very good. So hopefully this is the first of my Slattern Corner, and Sharon has the honor of being the first person we dissect, but hopefully some good has come from this and we can learn. It's certainly been insightful to me, but I'm going to leave it at that until the next time. MGTOW brothers, be strong. Remember, MGTOW rising.